Welcome everyone, Costini here with a bit of a discussion about the absurdity of Ultimate General American Revolution. And I am going to call it absurdity because there is no other way to describe this particular title. Anything else would not do it justice. I feel like I'm playing some alternate universe timeline or a fantasy timeline where basically Scarbrand has taken over Britain and is unleashing the endless hordes of Britain against the colonies. I feel like this war is going to go on until there's no man of fighting age left in Britain, because what's been going on in this campaign so far, it's crazy. I think I've reached a point where I probably killed something like close to 100,000 British troops. And within a year, within a year of this war started, within within 8 years, I will have killed a third of Britain's entire war-fighting population. And keep in mind, Britain does have a global empire, does have to maintain a very large navy. And I'm not even started on the naval aspect of the game because I am building ships. Once I build ships, the death toll will rise substantially. And this is absurd. But why exactly is this happening? Why am I killing so many troops? Well, one of the reasons is you're seeing it over here. Is 1 year, and this is not an army that started in Boston. I wish to point out, no. This army that you are seeing right here is an army that invaded Boston. And it's a naval invasion. So here's how things work. There are about 6,000, 7,000 troops, British troops in Boston. Okay, you say, all right, that's a painful early game, but you deal with it. You use a lot of cheese, but you deal with that. That's just the start. There's about 4,000 or so British troops in the various forts here that, by the way, did not exist in real life. And then maybe a couple of thousand in Canada that the British are going to send. Basically, loyalists and colonists in Canada that are going to come over here and fight you. So in total, you're probably fighting just over Boston. So between Boston, the forts, and Canada, you're probably fighting something like 15,000. That's just the start within the first couple of months of the game. But that is just the start. And these numbers, by the way, are not accurate, what you're seeing over here, but there's still thousands of troops here. And then, okay, you deal with that, you win that, but then they start launching sea invasions, 2,000 men, 3,000 men, something along those lines. Roughly 1,700 men initially, then they ramp up depending on how many troops they've killed and how long you've progressed the campaign. That's one of the things that does happen. But beyond that, the absurdity reaches new heights when you start when you start winning too much. And I hate when games do it. I understand that there's a desire to prevent the player from steamrolling. You're not doing that, by the way. Just gonna make this point to Game Labs. If your intent is to stop the player from steamrolling, you're failing flat on that. Because all you're doing right here, beyond the post-battle loot that you're creating, you're giving a lot of these colonial troops a ton of experience fighting here. Like, my troops steamroll the British because I've been fighting so much that while it may not necessarily be reflected here in like the experience they've gained, I have far more experienced companies and regiments than anything the game is spawning. But if you win too much, something will happen. A Royal Fury event. So what happens when Royal Fury gets triggered? You get 10,000 troops. And then on top of that, if you defeat those, you get 10,000 more, and on and on and on. I'm not sure when it stops, but it's such a stupid, silly system. And there's no other way to describe it. It is an incredibly silly and ridiculous system that we currently have in the game right now. And crazily enough, you don't have to worry about things like an economy. You don't have to worry about building your infrastructure or anything like that, because the British will provide. They'll send so many troops, and you will win post-battle loot. Now, what they've done, and they kind of reversed it, they nerfed post-battle loot. So you had these endless battles. They nerfed post-battle loot, but it doesn't change the dynamic that we have in the game. It just makes it far less rewarding and annoying. This is not the kind of game where you can sit on your ass. Well, you kind of can reach this point where, okay, I'll let them have Noriwook, and I'll let them have Fort George and Fort Frank and Castine, all of that. Okay, fair enough, right? I'll let them have all of this. I'll let them have all of this stuff. But But and you hope that the British don't attack. But the idea of just being passive on this and not dealing with the enemies is just inviting ourselves for failure. For instance, over here, there's thousands of British troops. I hope they're passive because, well, they might march on Quebec, which I have taken over here. But at the same time, I have to deal with the naval invasions. But if I win too much, if I actually succeed over here, I start getting more British troops coming in. And then it won't just come in via sea. Like you could say you could deal with them with the Navy. No, you'll end up dealing with them via land because they'll actually start showing up on land. And this was before the map expands to New York. So there was a recent patch that has added New York. I've seen that map. I've gotten to that point, like I'm very, very close to it. It's going to happen in August, by the way. So we're in the middle, we're in early July. By August, we're going to get that particular map, going to deal with that situation. So you end up, but either way, you end up in this kind of awful campaign dynamic. It's just as awful as dealing with constant endgame crisis in Total War. So endgame crisis in Warhammer 3 is not a good system because it's not creating a dynamic campaign experience. It's just basically the AI cheating to such an extent that it's getting a lot of free stuff. And I'm going to say it for myself. I don't care about the sandbox in these kind of titles as much as I care about history. One of the things I liked about Gettysburg and Civil War was the idea that we had a historical game, that we had these historical titles. This is so parallel to history that it wouldn't even make sense in real world. This is beyond the bounds of the physical universe. Because, understand, Britain may have lost tens of thousands in the entire war, but they weren't losing 100,000 in a year. And by the way, I predicted that I would kill over 100,000 of them in a year months ago, right? So I did the numbers. I understand, like, if I keep killing these many troops, I may have actually underestimated things because I didn't expect Royal Fury to come up. This dynamic is ridiculous. And I understand where it's coming from. It's this stupid idea. I'm going to call it a really stupid idea because it is a stupid idea. It's this stupid idea from a developer who thinks that players constantly need to have some stuff shoved in their face. They did it in Age of Sail. They kind of did it with Civil War. But the thing about Civil War, yes, the AI got a bunch of free stuff in that game, but it wasn't so absurd. It wasn't beyond the bounds of reality. And point of fact, it was like if you look at the Confederate campaign fighting against the Union, yes, the Union got a lot of troops. You could obliterate them in every battle and they would get a lot of troops all the same. But you could overcome that, and all it really meant is that, yes, you could, say, annihilate them at Fredericksburg and they would show up a bit later with more troops. Fair enough. And you could absolutely steamroll them. I might also add that actually steamrolling the AI in that game, you could win a campaign without doing that, and they would still get a bunch of troops, but obviously the number of troops they would get would be in relation to the number of troops that you've killed. Okay, this does happen in this game. The reason that worked in that game is that one, you could actually overtake the AI, whereas here we're constantly fighting outnumbered on the entire front, regardless of how many victories you've won, how much money you have. It also pushes you in this situation regardless of the post-battle. Like, unless they eliminate completely, even if they eliminate it completely, you'd still get experience. You'd still want this. Like, my generals are both Benedict Arnold and George Washington over here are max level. For whatever reason, George Washington has a low level of intelligence. I don't know what's triggering that. There's a lot of these game systems that I'm not quite sure I understand right here. Like, what exactly is leading to certain generals having certain stats? I don't know. But I do know, it's like, when you have a game where experience is gained in battles, guess what? The battles may not reward anything else. As long as you're getting experience, it doesn't matter. Like, so you have a training mechanic over here that's supposed to be training your units. I have not used this at all, because why would I care about this? Because this is expensive in ammunition. Why would I bother with that when I can find, like, just on this alone, just consider the experience aspect alone. Why would I bother training my troops in any way, shape, or form and spending resources that I can instead sell on the market, get a lot of money to fuel my economy? I'm not joking on this. Get a lot of money. And it's not encouraged to play passive, even if we ignore any kind of post-battle lieutenant experience. It's not encouraged to play passive. Do you know why? Because taking territory very quickly means you can get things like furs. It means that you can get stuff that's actually useful in your campaign. Because guess what? Some of these regions they're very lucrative. Like you get furs from Montreal, you get furs from you get furs or textiles or both from Quebec. You end up in a situation where you're just constantly feeding your war economy. So fighting endless battles is really the best way to go. And maybe, and this is the problem that Age of Sail had. This idea of constantly scaling it up to match anything the player was doing. It was awful in Age of Sail, and they removed it. They gave you an option to remove it, not tied to like anything like hard or anything like that. You could just remove the scaling up, and it was still awful even with that removed, because clearly this developer has no conception of balancing their own freaking games. At least they did balancing better in Civil War and Gettysburg. They have done a shit job, and I'm gonna say it. It's a shoddy job with Age of Sail that ruined the game, and it's ruining the game right now with Ultimate General American Revolution. I'm sure some fanboys are gonna dispute that, or some people don't like it. This is an awful system that's really gonna, like, this would be my argument. Like, if I was talking with developers, I would say the way you've done the difficulty is gonna just be so unappealing to so many people because you have a rough start to the campaign. What's also going to be unappealing about this is, like, all I'm thinking when I'm playing this campaign right now is like, man, I can't wait for the British campaign, because I expect tens of thousands of American troops to just hurl themselves in waves against me. I don't care how many of them they're going to hurl against me, because as the British, you have such key locations. Like, as the Americans, you obviously want to hold on to as much territory as possible. But as the British, it's like, take Providence, take Boston, take these critical areas that provide the best economy. Don't care about certain areas. Pin the Americans in those areas, or take everything and see where they spawn from and just camp them on their spawn. That's going to be the campaign. Like, it's becoming such an unappealing situation. Like, over the last couple of videos that I've done this particular campaign, I've fought thousands upon thousands of British troops. On and on and on and on. Now, I'm not against the idea of battles. The battles themselves are quite fine in this game. The problem, beyond just a shitty balance in terms of like the early game situation for Americans versus the British, beyond that particular problem, the individual battles, the way they play, that's fine. That could be engaging. But when you just keep throwing battles after battle non-stop at the player, this is normal. This is not even like some ultra high-end difficulty. I don't even want to play this game on that because it's awful. And to be honest, I've never wanted to play the higher difficulties. I've always felt that in this series, they've generally been really badly handled. I think this series, when you look back at Gettysburg, it was not built around the idea of like hard, normal, all that. No, the baseline difficulty of Gettysburg was great. And it was interesting how they handled difficulty with different AI profiles that were somewhere more aggressive, more passive. And that was the challenge, so to speak. And then they added difficulty because people complained. Whatever, right? But I always felt this series was best when it designed a campaign around one difficulty and made that the best experience. That's what this series has done with two games, Gettysburg and Civil War. They were awesome to play on the normal difficulties, modded, unmodded. There are mods. There's a mod that's a great mod that does improve the experience, and I believe that one of the key people behind that mod is actually working on balancing on them on this. So, good on him. I really hope he does better than what the developers have done so far. There have been some improvements, but this non-stop design decision, it's like, yeah, this game is, when this game comes out on Steam, like right now, it's just really off-putting for a lot of people. And I want to point out that the opportunity that they had with this particular game, because I'm going to mention it, when this game came out, like, Total War was at its lowest point that it's ever been as a series. And this is obviously based on Total War. The history of this game is very, very much tied to Total War. They had the opportunity, they had the interest, and then they fucked it up, basically, because they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't learn a damn thing from Age of Sail, which they clearly should have. Because, like, all the warning signs were in Age of Sail. They didn't learn a damn thing, and they did the same thing. They actually did worse in this, I feel. That's all I had to say. Might feel like a rant. This is a major issue. Look, I'll beat the campaign. That's not the problem. That's not the problem. I'll fight endless battles. I've done that before in games. That doesn't mean it's a great dynamic. And some people say, oh, nerf the post-battle, nerf all that. Again, it doesn't matter. Just controlling more territory is more useful than sitting on your ass with limited territory. Achieving more and makes you safer because you have buffer territories that you can afford to lose. Like, for instance, I controlled Norwalk, and the forts over here, I gave them up. That's the kind of buffer territory. Now, I don't necessarily have territory in Falmouth that I could lose, but I could lose, like, Le Mans, for instance, or some of the forts over here. Some of this territory here is not necessarily that important to me. Boston is, Quebec is, Montreal is. Other stuff, less so. That's why controlling a lot of territory is very, very important in a campaign, because it gives you buffer, so when they show up with a doom stack to wipe the floor with you, you have territory you can give. Regardless, that's all I had to say. Stay tuned for more.